The guest house lights were on. That was the first thing that felt wrong. It was our 10th wedding anniversary. Feng had told me he would be in his study all evening, finishing paperwork for the company before our dinner. I had prepared a small cake myself, nothing extravagant, just something warm and familiar. But the guest house was glowing like it was hosting a celebration of its own. I walked closer, my heels quiet against the stone path. I told myself it was nothing. A late meeting. A visitor. Any excuse that would let me stay blind. Then I heard his voice.
Soft.
Intimate. The voice he hadn't used with me in years. "I'll burn her belongings and say it was an accident," Feng said. I stopped breathing. There was a girl's laugh. Light and careless. "You're serious? That's cruel."
He scoffed.
"Cruel? It's efficient. She trusts me with everything. No one will question it." My hand slid off the cake box. The cardboard hit the floor with a dull thud. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. The door wasn't locked. They were there, tangled together on the sofa we used to lend to guests who stayed too long.
Feng froze when he saw me.
The girl scrambled away, pulling the blanket around herself. "Xiaoan," he said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "It's our anniversary." Silence. Then the girl spoke. "He said you were abroad." I laughed, a broken sound that surprised even me. "He also said he'd burn my belongings." Feng stood up slowly, irritation flickering across his face like I was the one who had interrupted something rude. "You shouldn't be here." "This is my home," I whispered. "Not for long," he muttered under his breath. I don't remember leaving. I only remember the night air hitting my face and the smell of smoke minutes later. Not from my imagination. Real smoke. The guest house was glowing, not with warm light this time, but with something wild and dangerous. People were shouting. Someone grabbed my arm. "Ma'am, step back." My heart slammed against my ribs as I watched the place that held 10 years of my life disappear behind a wall of flame and sirens. I don't remember falling. I remember waking up to white walls and the sound of machines. Xavier Chen was sitting beside my bed, eyes sharp behind his glasses, hands clasped like he was holding back a storm. "Xiaoan," he said softly. "You're safe." I stared at the ceiling. The woman who loved Feng had vanished in that fire. What was left was something colder. Something awake. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and quiet desperation. I hated it immediately. Xavier Chen didn't. He moved through the room with precision, adjusting monitors and speaking softly to the nurses while keeping his eyes on me. He had always been sharp-tongued and brilliant, a lawyer who could cut through lies like a knife, but tonight, he seemed protective. "You're awake," he said, leaning forward. "Good. I need to talk to you, but first, I need you to breathe." I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw. My hands trembled, even though the fire was no longer threatening me. My mind, however, was ablaze with questions. Why did this happen?" I croaked. Xavier's eyes hardened. He ran a hand through his hair. "I've suspected Feng for months. I always thought he was suspicious, his sudden investments, the way he avoided financial questions, the trips he never explained." "Feng," my lips trembled. The name tasted like ash. He said he'd burn my belongings. He said it would be an accident. He wanted me gone." Xavier's jaw tightened. "And he almost succeeded. But not this time. You survived. And now we make sure he doesn't get another chance." The words rang in my ears, sharp and real. I was no longer the naive woman who believed in a perfect marriage. I was someone who had walked through fire, literally, and come out alive, with nothing but the truth and a growing sense of justice. Xavier continued, his voice calm but insistent. "I've already started collecting evidence. Surveillance footage, financial records, eyewitness accounts. Feng didn't just start the fire on a whim. He had an insurance policy. He planned this. And now we can prove it." I swallowed, tears burning behind my eyes. I don't know if I can face him." "You won't have to face him alone," he said firmly. "I will be by your side. Every step. You trust me, don't you?" I hesitated, then nodded. He had been my family's lawyer for years, the one who had always raised his eyebrows at Feng's inconsistencies. The one man who had never lied to me. Perhaps for the first time, I felt I could. Over the next few days, Xavier guided me through interviews, statements, and the tedious but necessary collection of evidence. Each detail we uncovered painted Feng as the man he truly was, not the charming husband I had once loved, but a man willing to destroy lives for profit. One evening, after reviewing hours of surveillance footage, I sank into the chair, exhausted. Xavier handed me a glass of water. "You're stronger than you think, Xiaoan," he said. "You survived this. You're going to make sure he pays for it." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized that in the midst of my pain, someone had always been quietly protecting me. Not for power, not for fame, but for me. "Thank you," I whispered. I don't know what I'd do without you." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "You do it yourself. I'm just here to make sure you don't have to get burned again." And in that moment, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't just survive. I would ensure justice. Not only for myself, but for the woman who had perished, for the truth that had been silenced, and for the future I refused to let Feng dictate. Because some fires don't just destroy, they awaken. And mine had just begun. The first time I saw Feng after the fire, I realized how little power he truly had over me now. He stood in the courtroom lobby, eyes darting nervously, suit slightly wrinkled, hands clenched like he was holding onto a world that had already slipped away. And I didn't feel fear. I felt focus.
Clarity.
A single-minded determination to see justice done. Xavier was at my side, calm as ever. "Remember," he said, "don't let him manipulate your emotions. He can only act through fear or guilt. Neither will work now." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It wasn't just about me anymore. The woman who had died in that fire, her life had been stolen. Her absence screamed through every corner of that house I had once called home. I wouldn't let it be forgotten. For weeks, Xavier and I went through Feng's life like detectives. Bank statements, insurance policies, fire department reports. Every anomaly, every late-night expense, every change in his travel itinerary was scrutinized and documented. It was exhausting, but each piece of evidence made the man I had loved in silence smaller and smaller in my mind. One night, while we were poring over financial documents in my apartment, I looked up at him. "You've always suspected him," I said softly. "Why didn't you tell me before?" He adjusted his glasses, gaze sharp and steady. "Because I didn't want to frighten you with suspicions. I wanted proof first. And when I saw the pattern, Xiaoan, I realized you had no idea who you were married to. I wanted to protect you, but I also wanted you to see him for what he truly is, not what he pretended to be." I felt a pang of gratitude, mixed with something else. Something warmer, stronger. "Thank you," I whispered. "For not lying. For not letting me live in a fantasy while he was plotting against me." He didn't answer with words. He simply handed me another folder of evidence and leaned back, eyes never leaving mine. There was trust in that silence, a quiet understanding that we were on the same side, always. The next morning, we met with a fire investigator who confirmed Xavier's suspicions. The fire had been deliberately started in multiple locations, accelerants had been used, and the timing perfectly coincided with Feng's fraudulent insurance filings. "It's textbook arson for profit," the investigator said, his tone clinical. "And if this is presented properly, the court will take it very seriously." I shivered, not from fear, but from righteous anger. Feng had tried to erase me, to erase the woman who loved him, and even the woman who had cared for him deeply. And now, every lie, every calculated betrayal, every act of greed was going to be exposed. Xavier watched me carefully. "This is the part where most people break," he said. "Where they let emotions cloud judgment. But you're different." I met his gaze, a fire building inside me that had nothing to do with the flames of that night. "I've walked through fire, Xavier. I survived it. And I'm not breaking for him. Not anymore." He smiled faintly, but there was pride there. "Good. Because the next steps will require both courage and cunning. And I need you at your strongest." And I was. Because for the first time, I wasn't acting as the betrayed wife. I was acting as the woman who had survived the fire, who had seen her life nearly destroyed, and who would now ensure that the man who caused it paid for every deceit, every lie, every calculated betrayal. This was no longer personal. It was justice. And with Xavier by my side, I knew we would see it through. The first time I faced Feng after the fire, I realized the power had shifted. He tried to meet my gaze in the law office, but I didn't flinch. I walked in with Xavier beside me, each step deliberate, my heart calm, not trembling as it once had. The air between us carried tension, thick and suffocating, but I felt no fear. Only clarity. You shouldn't be here, Feng said, his voice low, attempting command. I smiled, but it wasn't kind. I belong here, I said. Every step you tried to erase, every secret you thought would remain hidden, it ends now. Xavier stepped forward, sliding a thick folder across the table. This contains everything we've gathered, he said. Financial records, witness statements, fire reports, insurance documentation. It all points to one thing: your deliberate attempt to destroy your wife and the woman who loved you. Feng's jaw tightened. He ran a hand over his hair, the smugness he usually carried vanishing like smoke. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You married me for appearances, for convenience. You thought the woman beside you was replaceable. You planned a fire to get rid of me and profit from it. And you didn't even stop to consider who would survive. His face turned pale, anger flickering. This isn't real evidence. You can't prove anything. I leaned forward, my voice steady, controlled. Oh, I can and we will. Every document, every recording, every statement from witnesses confirms the truth. You won't walk away from this one, Feng. Not this time. Xavier watched silently, his presence steady and unwavering. Then, as if to punctuate my words, he opened the folder, revealing photographs of the guest house aftermath, detailed insurance records, and the report from the fire investigator confirming accelerants were used. You see, I said, meeting Feng's eyes. This isn't just paperwork. This is the reality you tried to create, and it's collapsing. Feng slammed a hand on the table. You think this changes anything? You've lost, I said softly, almost pitying him. Not because of me, not because of anyone else. You've lost because the truth doesn't bend for liars. And Xavier, I added, glancing at him. Thank you for standing by me, for never letting me be deceived. Xavier's eyes softened slightly. You didn't need me to fight for you. You've been stronger than you realize. I just made sure you weren't alone. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Not just from Feng, not just from danger, but safe in the knowledge that lies and cruelty could not control my life anymore. Over the next days, we filed the reports, worked with the investigators, and ensured every piece of evidence was irrefutable. The world outside didn't know what was happening inside my life, and for the first time, that secrecy felt like freedom. One evening, after a long day of meetings and statements, Xavier and I sat quietly in the office. The city lights outside were dim and soft, and the air smelled faintly of rain. You're going to be okay, he said. And when this is over, Feng will face the consequences he deserves. I exhaled, letting the tension leave my shoulders. I know, and I won't let him manipulate me anymore. I've walked through fire, literally, and survived. Nothing he does can control me again. Xavier nodded. Then let's finish this. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw someone who had never lied to me, never betrayed me, and never let me walk alone. And I realized that in the ashes of betrayal, I had not only discovered justice, I had found a new kind of trust. The courtroom smelled like tension and polished wood, a place where truth and lies collided under the weight of official authority. Feng sat across from me, all arrogance stripped away. His suit hung loosely on his shoulders, his eyes darting nervously. Gone was the charming man I had once trusted. Now he looked small, like the lies he had built his life on were finally catching up with him. Xavier stood beside me, his presence calm and commanding, the perfect balance to my quiet intensity. "Stay focused," he whispered. "Remember why we're here." I nodded. Every detail of the fire, every fraudulent insurance claim, every cruel plan he had crafted was now in the hands of the court. I had prepared myself for this moment for weeks, but the weight of facing him in person was heavier than I expected. The prosecutor began, laying out the evidence systematically. Bank statements, witness testimonies, surveillance footage, and the fire investigators' detailed report were presented one by one. When the photographs of the guest house after the fire were displayed, I felt a pang, but not of fear, of resolve. The woman who had perished, the home that had been my sanctuary, the life I thought I had. They were gone. But I was still here. And this time, I had the power. Feng's lawyer tried to dismiss the evidence, claiming accidental fire, misinterpretation, and coincidence. But Xavier countered every argument with precision, unwavering in his defense of me. "Your Honor," Xavier said, standing tall, his voice steady, "this fire was neither accidental nor unforeseeable. Mr. Feng deliberately manipulated his environment, orchestrated insurance claims, and endangered lives. The evidence is irrefutable. My client, Ms. Chen, survived by sheer chance. Justice demands accountability." I watched Feng squirm, his confidence eroding with every statement. The arrogance I had once feared now looked absurd in his eyes. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't trembling. I was standing as the woman he had tried to erase, and I was winning. After hours of testimony and cross-examination, the judge called a recess. Xavier squeezed my hand gently. "You're doing incredible," he whispered. "Stay strong. This isn't over yet, but the truth is on our side." I exhaled slowly, letting my body release some of the tension. "I never imagined I'd face him like this," I admitted. "I used to be afraid of his words, his charm, his control. But that's gone now." "You're not just surviving anymore," Xavier said quietly. "You're reclaiming everything he tried to take from you." The following days were a blur of testimonies, document reviews, and procedural meetings. Each session reaffirmed the same truth. Feng had planned the fire, manipulated evidence, and sought to profit from lives he considered expendable. And when the final day arrived, the court was silent as the judge delivered the verdict. "Mr. Feng," the judge said, voice steady, "your deliberate actions endangered lives and attempted to defraud for personal gain. You are hereby sentenced according to the full extent of the law." I felt a weight lift off my chest, a sensation I hadn't realized I had been carrying for years. Justice had been served. Xavier turned to me, eyes softening. "It's over," he said. I nodded, tears threatening but not falling. "It's finally over." And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe freely. Not because the fire had ended, but because I had survived it, and because the man who had lied and betrayed me could no longer dictate my life. Standing there with Xavier, I realized something else. In the ashes of betrayal, I had found someone I could truly trust. The only man who had never lied to me, never tried to control me, and never let me face danger alone. The days after Feng's sentencing were surreal. The world outside continued as usual, oblivious to the fire that had tried to consume my life, to the man who had betrayed every ounce of trust one had given him. But for me, nothing would ever be usual again. Every step I took felt deliberate, grounded, as if I were reclaiming space that had once been stolen. Xavier stayed close, though not in a protective shadow. He had never been like that. His presence was steady, confident, and unwavering. Reminder that some people could be trusted without question. I hadn't realized until now how much I had needed someone like that beside me, not to save me, but to stand with me while I found my own strength. One evening, we walked through the charred remains of the guest house. The walls were being rebuilt, contractors and workers moving in and out, repairing what the flames had destroyed. I had initially thought I would avoid the place forever, but now I felt a strange sense of reclamation. "This place won't define me anymore," I said quietly, stepping carefully over a fragment of melted railing. Xavier's eyes followed me, softening. "It's not the place that defines you. It's what you do with your life moving forward." And you've already begun. I paused and looked at him. You always knew he wasn't trustworthy. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I wanted you to see the truth yourself, he replied. Not from suspicion, not from fear, from evidence. And because I knew you'd survive this, Xiaoan. You're stronger than you realize. His words settled over me like warmth, not pity. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone reborn, someone who could choose the direction of her life. Over the next weeks, I began to reclaim my professional life. I attended meetings, reclaimed accounts that Feng had tried to manipulate, and met with the families of those affected by the fire. Each interaction reminded me that my survival wasn't just personal, it was proof that I could rebuild, that I could rise, that I could lead. And through it all, Xavier remained beside me, never overstepping, never forcing himself into my decisions. He offered guidance when I asked, perspective when I was uncertain, and support without strings. One night, after a long day of meetings, we sat together on the balcony of my apartment. The city lights stretched out before us, and the air smelled faintly of rain. You've changed, he said softly. The woman who walks through fire and survives, she doesn't let anyone dictate her life. I smiled faintly. I'm still me, I said. Just more aware of what I deserve, and who I want by my side. He studied me, a small, quiet smile tugging at his lips. I want to be here, he said. Not because you need me, but because I choose to be. And in that moment, I realized that the man who had been honest, steadfast, and unwavering, even when the world around us was chaotic, was the man I could finally trust with both my past and my future. The fire had taken much from me, yes, but it had also cleared away the illusions, the lies, and the false promises. What remained was truth,
Strength.
and the possibility of love without fear. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control, not of the world, not of others, but of myself. And standing there with Xavier, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let anyone burn that part of me again. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, painting the room in gold. I had never felt this calm before. Not after the fire, not during the chaos of the investigation, not even in the tense moments of the courtroom.
But now I did.
I poured myself a cup of tea and looked across the table at Xavier. He was reviewing documents as usual, sharp and focused, but there was something different today. A softness in his eyes whenever he looked at me, not pity, not concern, but respect and trust. You're quiet this morning, he said, glancing up. Thinking about work, or something else? Freedom, I said, smiling faintly. I'm thinking about freedom. He raised an eyebrow. Freedom? Yes, I replied, swirling the tea in my cup. I survived betrayal. I survived fire. I survived lies and deceit. And now, I can live for myself. I can make decisions without fear. I can trust myself, and for the first time, I can trust someone else. Xavier's lips curved into a small smile. That's a rare thing to feel. I nodded. It is. But I feel it with you. You've never lied. You've never hidden anything from me. You've never let me face danger alone. I've spent years being manipulated, being deceived, being used. And now I realize the only person I can truly depend on is the one who never tried to control me in the first place. He set the papers down and leaned back in his chair. And that person is me? I met his gaze steadily. Yes, Xavier. That person is you. For the first time, we didn't speak about lawsuits, insurance claims, or evidence.
We spoke about life.
About choices.
About trust.
About the kind of love that isn't built on obligation or manipulation, but on honesty and mutual respect. Over the following weeks, I began to reclaim not only my life, but my sense of self. I visited the rebuilt guest house, not as a victim, but as someone who had endured and survived. I met with friends I had distanced myself from, slowly reconnecting with a world I had allowed Feng to overshadow. And through it all, Xavier remained a constant. Not overbearing, not intrusive, but steady. Whenever I hesitated, he offered guidance. Whenever I doubted, he reminded me of my strength. Whenever I feared, he reminded me that I was never alone. One afternoon, as we walked through the city streets, I realized how much I had changed. I no longer felt the need to hide my emotions, to protect myself behind a mask of politeness or avoidance. I walked tall, spoke clearly, and smiled without fear. "You're different," Xavier said softly. "I am," I replied, "because I finally know who I am and who I want to have beside me." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "And that's me." "Yes," I whispered, feeling the warmth of trust and choice settle in my chest. "You are the one I trust. The one I choose." And in that moment, I realized something profound. The fire that had once threatened to destroy me had actually illuminated the truth. It had burned away the illusions, the lies, and the manipulations. What remained was authenticity, strength, and the beginnings of love that was real, unwavering, and freely given. For the first time, I didn't feel fear when I looked forward. I felt excitement,
Possibility.
and a certainty that my life, my choices, my happiness, and my love were finally mine. Because I had survived. I had reclaimed my life. And for the first time, I was truly free. The courtroom drama, the investigations, the fire, and the betrayal, all of it felt like a distant shadow now. Standing on the balcony of my new home, I watched the city sparkle below, each light a reminder that life goes on, even after darkness. Xavier stood beside me, quiet and steady as always. We didn't need words to communicate. The silence between us was enough. He had been my anchor through the storm, the only one who had never faltered, never lied, never let me walk alone. And now we were free, not just from Feng, but from fear, doubt, and the burden of betrayal. "I can't believe it's finally over," I murmured, resting my hand on the railing. "It is," Xavier said softly. "And now it's just the two of us, building something new." I turned to look at him, really look at him. His expression was calm, but I could see the faint smile tugging at his lips, the warmth in his eyes that only appeared when he thought no one was watching. And for the first time, I felt something deeper than gratitude, something tender and strong. "You've always protected me," I said. "Not from danger, but from illusion, from lies, from being misled. I don't know how I can ever thank you enough." "You don't have to thank me," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "I did it because it was right, and because I care about you." I blinked, my heart catching. The world seemed to pause for a moment, and I realized that what I felt for him had grown slowly, quietly, like a fire rekindled after surviving a storm. "I care about you too," I whispered. He reached for my hand, holding it firmly but gently. "Then let's stop surviving," he said. "Let's start living. Together." The words felt like a promise, and I knew they were sincere. I had spent so long being deceived, being manipulated, being afraid. But here, now, I could trust completely. Not because the past was perfect, but because the future was ours to build. Over the next weeks, we settled into a rhythm, simple, honest, and comforting. We didn't need extravagant gestures or public declarations. Every quiet moment together, every shared meal, every late-night conversation about plans, dreams, and hopes became part of the foundation of our life. I also began reclaiming parts of myself I had neglected, the hobbies, the friendships, the little joys that Feng had tried to overshadow. Xavier encouraged me, but never pressured me, always allowing me to rediscover the world on my terms. One evening, as we sat on the balcony again, the city lights twinkling below, I leaned my head against his shoulder. "I never thought I could feel this peace again," I said softly. "You deserve it," he whispered. "And you've earned it. Every step of the way, you've proven your strength." I smiled, closing my eyes. The warmth of his presence, the certainty of truth, and the absence of fear made me feel lighter than I had in years. I was no longer the woman trapped by lies, deceit, and betrayal. I was Qiao and strong, independent, and finally, truly happy. And as I looked up at the stars, I knew one thing for certain. The fire that once threatened to destroy me had ultimately forged me. It had burned away the illusions, leaving only truth, love, and freedom. With Xavier by my side, I was ready to embrace every moment of this new life, not as a survivor, but as a woman who had found her strength, her justice, and her happily ever after. Because some fires don't just destroy, they illuminate the path to everything worth fighting for. And mine had led me to him.